Welcome to the NHL 94 podcast, part of the CBP Media Network. This podcast is dedicated to the greatest game ever developed, where I will talk about the development of the game, tournaments and matches, our stories about NHL 94, the people that make up the NHL 94 community, the games won, lost, and the chirps that need to be heard around the world. Welcome 16-bit hockey fans to yet another edition of the NHL 94 podcast. And today we'll be using not just the start button, but the start and select button, because we'll be diving deep into just, Genesis and Super Nintendo. No, we're not going to be playing Super Mario or Super Mario Kart. Love those games, by the way. They're fantastic. No, we'll be talking about NHL 94, both on the Genesis and the Super Nintendo, the console that brought us Mode 7. And with that, I'm going to bring in John/Chaos. How are you, Chaos?
Good. How's it going?
Living the dream, man. Another day, another dollar, a little closer to retirement, and can't wait till I get there.
I love the Roanoke in the background in your frame there. Very nice.
He is, a lot of people would say he's the GOAT or close to the GOAT in the NHL version. I'm not sure how he does, how well he is in the Super Nintendo version, but maybe you could give us an idea, like what's the disparity between the two systems with NHL 94. But before we go any further, Chaos, let's talk about your road to finding and playing and getting into NHL 94. I want to hear how it is you got into it.
Oh, sure. So we're going to go back to mid-90s, let's say. Mid-90s, playing hockey with my friends down in the we lived on a street with a cul-de-sac, nice big circle at the end. So we used to play a lot of street hockey there. And one of my friends, I was probably, I want to say, 92, 93. I would say it was probably in around 7th grade. So 7th grade. So we're all down there playing, and a bunch of different ages. My friend's dad used to play too. He used to run around. We used to play on rollerblades. So 2 doors down from me was one of my friends, and he had the Genesis version of 94. So we would play, we go out, play hockey, and then afterwards we go in and play some 94 at his house. I didn't have a Genesis growing up. I had a Super Nintendo. First, I had a Nintendo, sold my Nintendo, and then save up money for Super Nintendo. And my intro to 94 was that. But then the first 94S game I owned was NHL Hockey for PC. So I owned the PC version. Loved that game. That game was great. I ended up getting the Super Nintendo version of 94. And my other buddy that lived a couple streets down, we would play that game after school for hours.
So
Go ahead.
I was going to say the NHL game for the PC that's apparently a lot of people that played it, they loved it, and you too. It seems like you. In some ways, it's vastly superior, and maybe in many ways, or always, it's vastly superior to the console versions. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they had trades, they had award ceremonies at the end of the season. You could do a whole season, move guys around from team to team. Yeah, it was I love that. And it was great too when before the game would start, it would show you the lines and it would show you the jersey numbers of each player in each line. It was very well done, the PC version. If you haven't tried it out, I try it out. It's fun.
Yeah, it's way more polished. I've seen video of it on YouTube, but to be perfectly honest, I've never played it. And you know what? I'm even going to give a little bit of information here. I have yet to play NHL 94 on the Super Nintendo. I've played NHL 93. I forget what they call it. NHL PA, I think was the official name on 93 on SNES. Now, the guy across the street from me growing up had that. And that's one of the things that really turned me off, is because I don't know if it's true or not, but the way I remember it to be was it was choppy. Like the game itself was not fluid. It was compared to, because I played NHL Hockey, NHL 92 on Genesis, and I played NHL PA on the Genesis. Both games were fluid. It worked fantastic. Then I saw my friend with NHL PA on the SNES. I'm like, this is a piece of crap in comparison to what I'm used to on the Genesis. But yeah, this wasn't just in my head. There's legitimate truth to this, right?
Oh yeah. Well, the Genesis version, any of the Genesis versions of the game, they play at full frame, so they're 60 frames per second. Super Nintendo, I think it's 45. I think it's definitely not 60. And I think 93, I've never played 93 Super Nintendo. I played 94, 95, 96. But I think 93, they really just kind of like bodged together. So it was just like a rush release from what I've heard. And it's pretty bad. Yeah. So you can tell if you play one and the other, play one game on Super Nintendo and then play again on Genesis, you definitely tell the difference. It's a lot smoother on Genesis.
Yeah, but not to say the NHL 94 on the SNES is a bad product. I've seen video on it on YouTube. It seems to be really good in comparison to the Genesis version. So I'm not going to knock it. In fact, I love the Super Nintendo. I'm going to go into a little bit into the weeds here. I had both the Genesis and the SNES growing up. And with respect to the games on the Genesis, I like the sports games better on there, but overall, I love the SNES better. Final Fantasy 2, Final Fantasy 3, Chrono Trigger, Earthbound, Super Mario World, Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past. The list goes on and on. They're classics, each and every one of them. And I'm missing a bunch too. But anyways, I don't want to talk too much about it.
I don't know. Listen, I'm all into RPGs. That's what you're absolutely right. Super Nintendo was RPG heaven, and but you're absolutely right. The sports games were always better on Genesis.
There were a couple of good RPGs on the Genesis, though. The Phantasy Star series,
Phantasy Star,
2 and 3, I think, or 2 and 4.
Yeah,
one of them was
4 was great.
Okay, so 3 was
3 and 4 were good. Yeah, 1 is horrible. I don't know if 1 came out on Genesis.
1 came out on the Master System. Right? Yeah. That was light years ahead of its time.
Yeah,
that wasn't. But 2 was
on the Master System. Yeah. 2 is hard to play. I've actually played it a few months ago. I tried playing 2, and I was like, I had to start playing 4.
Really? Okay. Well, yeah. SNES, it has the RPG genre covered, and also Super Mario RPG too. You can't talk about the RPG series without mentioning that. But nowadays, what do you prefer to play? If given an opportunity, if somebody puts both consoles in front of you and fully loaded and everything, which one are you going to gravitate towards? Or actually, I'm even going to throw in a couple of more. There's even the Genesis CD sitting over there, and also the PC version. Which one is Chaos going to go towards?
Probably the PC version, to be honest. Really? But console, we're talking consoles here. Depends what I want to do. If I want to have fun, I'm going to play Super Nintendo. Super Nintendo's fun. The 94, it's arcade feeling. I always say it's like the arcade version of 94. It's just anything goes. Really, it's not much to think about. Everyone's a pretty decent player, and on the teams. We're talking about players in the game, and it's just it's fun. You could score one-timers from the blue line easily. Like it's kind of mayhem. But Genesis is more like chess, where you really got to kind of, especially when you're playing online against someone, you really have to feel them out, and you have to try certain ways of scoring. And, then you walk, coming into the checking, how you're checking players with lightweight, heavyweight. It's more attribute oriented, I would say, whereas Super Nintendo is just like balls to the wall, like just have fun. So,
in terms of
depends what I want to do.
Though. Are the taxes generally the same? Because in the Genesis version, you could do that wrap around and kind of at the top of the circle or the bottom of the circle, you could kind of to shoot one in the top corner, or the one timer where you set somebody up in the middle of the slot and use that to score a goal. Is that the same type of tactics that work generally well to score goals in Super Nintendo, or something else?
Yeah, some of the same tactics work. Deeks and one timers are very powerful in Super Nintendo. Slap shots, not so much. To be honest with you, there's only a few guys in the community that can score consistently on slap shots in Super Nintendo, whereas in Genesis, it's one of the beginner scoring moves, I would say. But crease cut on both machines, the same. They both go. Controlling goalie is a lot harder in Super Nintendo, I would say, than Genesis. I think the movement of the goalie is a lot. If you're controlling your goalie, it's a lot better in Genesis than it is Super Nintendo. Super Nintendo just feels like you're moving a block around. Like there's no acceleration. It's just like boop, 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 on the screen. It's really not fun. So there's some nuances, but as far as like scoring and stuff, deeks and one-timers are the big thing on Super Nintendo. You can aim your one-timers on Super Nintendo, whereas you can't on Genesis. If you hold the direction pad, you know, if you're holding the corner of the D-pad, the one-timer is going to go to the corner. Genesis, it just tries to go to the open side of the net, so it's kind of automatic.
So if it's a newcomer coming in to play NHL 94, which would you recommend he or she plays
Super Nintendo.
first?
Super Nintendo. I think, and we see that a lot with the live tournaments. You know, we have community members, right? And so on the Genesis side, it's always usually the same group of community members that make it to the finals. Super Nintendo, it's always a guy that comes out of nowhere, and you're like, wow, this guy's good. And I mean, I think the first two, I think were won by guys who weren't members of the community at the time. So, you know, that's pretty impressive. You could just come out in the middle of nowhere, pick up the game. And there were guys that never took goalie control, and they finished like 4th, 5th place. And, you know, it's just Super Nintendo is a lot easier, I think, to learn, in my opinion. So that's what I would tell people to play.
On the PC version, because you've basically outlined how it is somebody could play on a Genesis. You outline how somebody can play on the SNES. I want to hear your analysis on the PC version.
I don't remember. It's been a long time.
It's not something you picked up recently.
No. It's, PC version I played when I was a kid, right? So I don't remember the last time I played it, but I don't believe there's manual goalie in the PC version. I think the PC version plays a lot like Super Nintendo, to be honest with you, from what I remember.
Now, in terms of the PC version, is there an online community surrounding that? Because I could go on the Discord. There's nothing, right? It's bare bones. There's nobody there.
No, we've never tried to do anything with the PC version online. I don't even know if it's possible. I mean, I guess it could be. We could use DOSBox or something to play it. I've never even tried it. That's a good question. We should try that out.
Maybe we should set one up this evening. So Chaos,
Yeah,
if you want after this, we'll do a test run to see if it works, and you can kick my ass in the PC version.
All right, take it easy. I got to figure it out first.
We get that far. You asshole, no problems. Curious then, for the SNES version, I want to pick your brain on both the Genesis and SNES version, but for SNES, you prefer the standard, the collarbone controller that generally comes with the console, or you like an aftermarket one?
I used the standard, the 6-button version of the Sega Genesis, the official one. Yeah. There's a couple other controllers that people use. I've used the 8-bit Do M30. That's pretty comfortable. It's very similar to the 6-button, the official 6-button controller. I've used some of the Retrobit official Sega controllers that they released, but I'm not really happy with the quality of them. I had one with a sticky B button, and then another one, I think the D-pad stopped working. I forget, but so it's kind of hit or miss with those. But to be honest with you, the best way is either using a official 3-button or a 6-button controller and using a USB adapter, Genesis to USB adapter, which you can pick up.
So the Genesis version, so you don't care if it's a 6-button or 3-button, as long as it's close enough to the original 6-button or 3-button. That's what you prefer.
The 3-button it's different size, right? So it's probably good for people who have larger hands. I prefer the 6-button. The D-pad, I think, on the 3-button is actually better than the 6-button. The 6-button gets a little loose after a while. But it's interesting because I've played when I first started with the community, and I was playing Super Nintendo. And then when I switched over to Genesis, I was using my Super Nintendo controller for Genesis games. And I think it's easier to pass using the Super Nintendo controller. There are a couple things that are different between the two controllers that I prefer. So I would use the Super Nintendo controller, but then I'm like, nah, I really should just stick with the Genesis controller, because if I go to live tournaments, that's what we're going to use.
Yeah. Yes, because that way you're used to that, and then you could easily dominate. Because there's not much of a transition. But it seems like I'll have to talk fondly of the SNES standard controller. That came out, like 33, 34 years ago. I'm not exactly sure when the SNES came out. But that controller, to this day, it's not just nostalgia is talking, but it just fits so well in the hand. The ergonomic design is phenomenal. And I don't know of another controller that has matched it since. Maybe we could talk about the PlayStation that's currently in a PlayStation 5 one is pretty darn good. But I love that one for the SNES. That's phenomenal. But the one thing I'm wondering how easy it would be to do compared to the Genesis version is a quick pass one time. I don't know, because I've never tried it yet. I'm just trying to picture in my head, is that controller, is it optimal to do that type of move? Because I know that the Genesis version, especially the 3 button, it's just right there. You can just slide your finger and do it. But did you find that the SNES version gives you, it's an optimal layout to do the quick pass in one time?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I find it a lot easier. You know what it is? I think from playing games like Mega Man, like if you play Mega Man X on Super Nintendo, you're doing a lot of jumping and shooting at the same time. So that's usually Y and B. And even the dash is A on Mega Man X. So you're doing a lot of dash and jumping. You get used to that roll. Those platformers for Super Nintendo. Even playing games like Super Metroid and stuff where you're dashing and then you're jumping and stuff like that, you get used to the roll. It's actually not bad. I would say it's about equal. I mean,
blasphemy.
Maybe people who are used to Genesis controller, but I agree with you. I think the Super Nintendo is probably the most perfect controller that was ever made. I know a lot of people also like the Sega Saturn controller, which also feels pretty nice in your hands. But Super Nintendo controller all the way. I mean,
yeah, I love it. And in fact,
Yeah.
I have one not too far from me over here. And I have to pick your brain. Yeah, do you have one too? If you do, show it off, man. I love that controller, man.
Hold on.
Do you also have the original SNES sitting around there too? That'd be pretty sweet if you could pull that off and just show it. I have the mini, very very close to me. But
yeah, give me a minute. I got it in my house. I'll be right back.
Sure.
All right.
Show it off. I want to see this.
Here's the Super Nintendo.
Love
so this
that
is the Famicom version. So you'll see the colors of the
because instead of being purple. Yeah.
So this is, and they're actually all concave and not convex, the buttons.
Ah.
On the standard US version, there's 2 and 2. And I also have, you ever use one of these Dogbone Nintendo controllers?
No,
oh yeah,
I've never seen them. That's cool.
They
that
came with the top
version.
loading NES. So the second iteration of the NES came out in like 92, I think. And so this one right here.
That's late in the lifespan of the NES, considering the Genesis
NES.
Yeah, the top loader. I've seen that all the time on Angry Video Game Nerd. He tends to play on that version than any other version.
Yeah, they're great. And then I have my Super Nintendo here, which is the junior version. So the second version of the Super Nintendo.
I've never seen
one of these.
No.
Yeah.
You got quite a collection.
Yeah, I got a lot of stuff.
I see also CRT monitors in the background.
Oh yeah. No, I have. There's the big one. It's a PVM.
I don't even know what a PVM is.
Those are professional video monitors. So those are like the gold standard of playing retro video games on.
So that's your secret. Yeah. Right? You're playing it on that. You have an advantage. Other people are playing on some crappy LCD.
No, I work with electronics, so I have a lot of electronics laying around, a lot of consoles. I got 2 PS1s I was fixing, and I got regular toaster NES over here. I got my Saturn, I got my Genesis. But when I want to play, I'm in my garage. I play in my house.
Gotcha.
A little bit easier, especially in the winter. It gets a little cold out here, but I need to set up like a really nice game.
Little space heater.
Like, let's see, CRTs. So the CRTs we use for live tournaments when we run in Long Island, LA Retro, every year in August. King Raff and I usually do it. So that's what those are for. It's the only time they get used when we bring.
So when you guys play, who tends to come out on top on either console?
When I play who? Raff?
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, Genesis I can understand. What about SNES?
No, it's usually, I don't know. I don't think I've ever played Raff on Super Nintendo. That's a very good question. I gotta look on the website and see if I ever played them before. There's a head-to-head records you could check.
It's
a very good question.
Anybody you'd like to call out? If you had a chance to call somebody out right now and play them and put them to the test to see if they're able to beat you or not, who would you call out?
You mean like in the community?
Yeah.
Or like every
the community.
Oh, who can I beat? I could
No, who would you call out? Just say right now I want to call you out. Let's have a match and I'm gonna to test you to see if I could beat you. Who is the guy that you take him?
Probably AJ, Angry Jay.
He's got the skill, man. He's got the skill.
He's got the skill. But every once in a while you take one from him and it makes you feel good.
As long as it's the last match of the day, you could take that with you somehow. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
In terms of the hacked ROMs, which are your favorite version of the hacked ROMs? Do you prefer the 2v2, the 5v5? What's your jam?
2v2 is very fun. If you've never played it, it's two skaters on a side. And we usually play 4 players, so there's 2 on a team, right? It's just really fun because there's a lot of ice. You do a lot of wacky things. You could pull off a one-timer. A 2-player one-timer is really hard to pull off, but you get one of those, you get it in. Feels really good. Yeah, it's really fun. I wish more people played it. It's tough to get a bunch of guys on, but I mean, listen, the standard version, right, is the best way to play it in my opinion. We have a lot of modded ROMs where we play, we have player drafts and we make ROMs. We change up the rosters and stuff. So that's actually what we had that. So I started playing in the community around 2007, and then 2009, I think, is when I started playing Genesis. And that was only because Genesis had draft leagues, and Super Nintendo didn't have any draft leagues yet. So that's what made me switch over. And then I played in a couple Super Nintendo leagues since then, but not many. It's just mostly my online presence is Genesis.
I want to dive deep into this draft league, but in just a moment. But if you had the dream matchup on a 2 versus 2, you and 3 other people, what would be your dream matchup to play?
Oh, sure. Dream matchup would be me and Raph on a team. I think we play pretty decent together. And then we probably go against like I want to say Sebi and Ice Storm. He's really good.
Have you ever had that
matchup? Those are really good 2v2 players. I don't think so. I don't think we've all played. Maybe we've all played at once. Maybe once. It must have been a while ago. Yeah, that'd be a really good one. Or
prediction of the score?
It'd be like 7-6. The scores in 2v2 games are ridiculous. There's no defense. It might be 7-6 after one period.
Well, you know what? Even before I go into the draft league, there's something else I want to touch on because I saw a quote that you put on the internet, and you were saying about NHL 94. He says, "My favorite memory of NHL 94 is playing against my friends every day after school.
Yep.
We would play about 30 games a day and keep track of our records." How did you guys do this? We just had the paper and pen and just who scored what, who beat who, and what's the story?
We just kept it in our head. It was really fun because we would just switch up teams, right? And then every 10 games we would play an all-star game. So one of us would be West, one of us would be East, and we do that every 10 games. And really funny story about that is so we played at my friend's house all the time. This is Super Nintendo. His house had a fire, and they closed up the house. The fire department, because obviously stuff got burned down. My Super Nintendo was in there, so we busted through the window to get the Super Nintendo and started playing again. And it didn't play in color anymore; it would only output in black and white, but it still worked. So we still played 94 just in black and white.
That's awesome.
I wish I still had that Super Nintendo. I forget what happened to it, but
to survive a fire.
This one I showed you is the one I bought to replace it. So I bought this in like 2000, I think.
Gotcha.
98, maybe 99, somewhere around that. So it outlasted a fire, and still played on it.
That's awesome. So now I want to talk about these draft leagues because I see this name out there, the Chaos Draft League.
Oh yeah.
What is it?
right, Chaos Draft League is probably the premier league, the premier draft league that's going on right now.
Are you saying that because you're associated with it, or is there
maybe? No. So it's a league that has so on Genesis, right? When you go to grab the goalie, usually you have to hold the B button down for a certain time period.
Yep.
I think it's like half a second, maybe, in the standard ROM. I forget. So we shorten that time so you can grab the goalie a lot quicker. It makes it a lot easier to maneuver, switch over to the goalie when a guy's doing a quick move. You'll get the goalie control quicker. Also, the goalie he could skate out a little bit farther from the crease. So he has a little bit more range. You could use him as like a third defenseman because anyone who knocks into the goalie automatically falls down. So you could use that as a tactic. Trying to think what else I did in that ROM. 1 minute penalties, which is pretty much the standard now in any draft ROM. 2 minute penalties is killer in the classic version of the game when you're playing 5 minute periods. So right. We cut that down to 1 minute. I also cut down the penalty shot time to, I want to say it's 10 seconds now, from 25 seconds. Yeah, something like that. Because people would fool around, and listen, you're going to score on a penalty shot, you better do it right away. That's the way I look at it. So, and the other thing too is the goalies all have a boost in speed. Oh no, I'm sorry, boost in agility, and a +1 boost to each one of their stick and glove ratings. So they all perform a little bit better than they would in the regular ROM. So usually in a draft league, the limit is there's a lot of good forwards in the game. There's not a lot of good defensemen, and the goalies after like 10 of them, after the top 10 are just straight trash. Yeah. So boosting these goalies makes them a little bit more usable, and just makes the league more fun. And the other major change was the hot and cold. So the game has a hot and cold aspect. Where some players play hotter this game than they would than another game, or they play colder. And so there's a very wide range. You could be super hot, you could be ice cold. So what I did was I found in the code where to adjust that variable to lessen the effect. So it's not guys aren't playing the same every game. There's some little bit of variance. Like sometimes they'll play a little bit better than they would other games, or a little bit worse, but it's not as crazy as it is in the classic version of the game.
So are you good with assembly?
Yeah, I can do assembly. Yeah.
So this is your jam then. You're looking at you're dumping the code, you're looking at it, and you're probably figuring it. So excellent. So
history. I'll give you a little history.
Go ahead.
I work in electronics, but I always wanted to do computer science. So when I was growing up in high school, I took computer science classes. It just so happened that when I graduated, I really wanted to take a year off between going to high school and college. And I was 17 at the time, so I graduated early. I ended up going to an electronics school. Okay. And so, but I love programming. So I do it all on the side. The whole NHL 94 online website, that's all me. I did the whole website. I built that. I had to redo that website. So to allow us to run multiple leagues online. So I love programming. So when just a few weeks ago, the source code for NHL 92 came out, which is the first version, NHL hockey, they call it, NHL 92. I love looking at that stuff. So I'm looking through that code, and I'm trying to figure out what does what. We could transfer it over to the 94. We can make specific changes, maybe even at some point add fighting back into the game.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the goal at some point. But first, I need to understand what's everything going on in 92 before I could start moving the stuff over. But
did you listen to the interview that I did with Mikey not too long ago? But he's also posted about this on the forum, so it's not.
I've talked to Mikey. Discord.
Yep. Yeah, so he's of the opinion, at least from what I could see. Now I'm reading between the lines here, and I could be wrong, Mikey. So please forgive me if I am. But it seems like the game was being created, and every time a version was released, for ready for testing, and it was shipped from Lesser's place to EA's head office for testing. Those versions had fighting in it, and eventually it got removed. So one of the last versions that had fighting in there probably still exists. That test version of NHL 94 that has fighting still is probably available in the wild somewhere. We just have to find it.
Oh, yeah.
And if it ever is discovered, then I'm not sure if it's a simple just transplanting the code but there's no sprites for fighting. Is that true?
So you'd have to add the sprites back in. I mean, there's not too many sprites, I think, for fighting. I did find where it checks for fighting, and I noticed that the code in 94 is missing. It's gone. But that doesn't mean that we could carry it over from 92. A lot of the code from 92 to 93 to 94 is the same. They just made minor changes each year, other than, roster changes and stuff like that. But changes to the game, the core game concepts, very little changes. Obviously, 94 was a little bit bigger because they added one-timers, they added manual goalie control, they added. I don't know if 93 had hot and cold. They added some bonuses. Yeah, so that's a little bit different. There's a couple differences, but as far as like the main gameplay, it's based on 92. So if we can understand everything in 92 by looking at the source code, so the source code is the code that the developer used to make the game. So they have notes. This function does checks. This function is for shooting. Like when you hit the shot button, it's going to go here. And then this is what it does. And so it's nice to have that instead of just looking at the disassembly of the ROM, which is all we had. Now we have the developer's code that we can base off of. Now it's still in the assembly, but it's line for line separated, and it's there's comments here and there telling you what the game is doing. So it's a lot easier to understand. So once you go through all that, I'm going to mark in all the code in 92. Then I'm going to start, comparing it to 94, see what does what. So that's the plan. But I love doing that. I would stop playing 94 and just do that full time. Like with all my free time, that stuff is it's so fascinating to me. So
it's time to do a GoFundMe. So we could fund your life at the same time while you do this. The community should just gather around and let's get this
let me
guy
quit
done.
my job and have you guys pay for me to do this. Yeah. That'll go over well with my wife.
But the reality is, given the fact that you have family, you have a job, you have a life, and so many other things that are pulling away at your time. If you could put a time frame on how soon, realistically, fighting could end up in NHL 94, we're talking years, or is that realistic?
Yeah, probably. The code, there's a lot of code, right? So I'm about maybe 20% through labeling the 92 disassembly to the source code. So there's a program called, the ROM it's in machine code, not even assembly. It's called machine code. So then you have to put it into a program called the disassembler. And so that gives you the assembly code. All right. So you take that, and I'm looking at the source code, which is also an assembler. So I'm comparing the two, and I'm transferring the notes from the source code to the disassembled code. And then at that point, then I can compare. I could look at the function, specific functions, like I said, shooting, passing. Like I've already made some comparisons, which is pretty neat, because I'm very interested in the mechanics of the game, how like passing works, how shooting works, what attribute does what. There's a lot of stuff that's still in the air that we have no idea. So trying to find that stuff out is very helpful with the source code. But yeah, as far as like putting fighting back into the game, it'll probably be like, I'd say at least a year. I want to say.
I think that
it might not even be possible, but as far as like getting to that point where you're trying to do that, it'll probably be that long. But to be honest with you, there's a lot of code in 94 that is checking for fighting. Like it's looking, are they fighting? No, then do this. This kind of hit should cause a fight in 92. You see that in 94, and then it just goes to blank code. It's a jump to a function that has blank code. So it was there at some point. You could tell because they left in all the checks. They just took the main part of the fighting code out.
Is there any code that you could see that issues a major penalty, a 5-minute major for fighting?
So you can add that. Well, we can currently change the penalty times for every penalty. That's we have that ability already. We know
for specific ones. Like if somebody does a charging, you could give like 4 minutes for instance.
Give 4 minutes. Yeah. You could change them specifically. Yeah. And no one's really done that, but you can. There is still a fighting penalty in 94. It's just never given, obviously. I think there's an instigator penalty also that's just never used. So that stuff's still there. There's
that instigator penalty started. It was also in 92, by the way. That was it was that's carried over from the beginning. Yeah. I remember that penalty pissed me off numerous times when I got that penalty.
So yeah, I've been playing 92. I've been trying, I've been playing 92 just to see what causes what, right? And so penalties, it's stupid. You get a 5-minute penalty for fighting in a 5-minute period, and you get a 2 minute, and another guy might get a 2-minute instigator penalty, and you're like, what the heck's going on here?
They give you some background. Actually, that instigator rule in reality came into effect, I think, in the 91-92 NHL season. I think that's the first year it came into effect. Before that, you could have instigated a fight with no retribution. So I'm going to go into the weeds here. If you watched hockey before then, before this instigator rule came out, there was enforcement on the ice by the players. So the star players weren't abused the same way they were afterwards, because afterwards then there could be an instigator rule and screw things up. Before that happened, if you were going to go after it, say a Gretzky, for instance, well, Semenko's going to come in and pound a crap out of you. So you didn't go after Gretzky. He left him alone. And hence the players, they just policed themselves. I'm just going on a tangent here. And I think this is all because of Gary Bettman, that piece of crap. But
yes. We can all agree on that. He's a piece of crap. Yeah. Yeah, interesting. I started watching hockey because of 94, actually. So playing it, Calgary Flames were my favorite team in the game when I first started playing, and I started following them. So I live in New Jersey, and I'm a Calgary Flames fan. It's very weird. So
I watched the Stanley Cup. I'm old enough to watch them lose and win the Stanley Cup.
You saw 89, yeah. No, I saw them lose in 2004.
Okay, so yeah, I've seen it was it was good times in the 80s too. Now I gotta just go back before we go further into the hacking of these ROMs. And I just wanted to divert quickly. You were talking about in the chaos draft leagues. There's an adjustment to the agility and the goalies. You give them a +1 in the agility and stick and glove ratings. Does this change anything with the top tier goalies? So, for instance, Patrick Roy and Belfour, did they become even better, or are they kind of capped?
So Watt and Belfour are the only two goalies that don't get the boost because they are already max or close to max. So it starts with Fuhr, who's the third best goalie in the game. He gets a boost, so he becomes very similar to Belfour and Watt in that case. So think of having three guys who are top goalies. There's a limit to the attribute values. So we have a scale of 0 to 6. 6 is the highest it can be in the game, and 0 is the lowest it could be in the game. So if we look at like an overall, like a 0 to 100 scale, so when you're looking at the line screen or the team roster or something, and you're looking at the attribute values. So you see speed is like a 72, right? 72 would be a 4, a base 4. And you see agility is a 90, that's a base 5. 99 is the highest it'll show on the screen, but actually a 6 is a 108 if you're working on that scale. A 0 is actually a 25. You'll never see anyone below a 25 at any rating. In 94, I think in 92 and 93, people were like close to 0.
Yeah, Ken Baumgartner had like a 2.
Yeah, something
John
like
Chambers
that,
was like a 1 or something. I remember they were so fun to play with because they moved it and shot so slow.
Yeah,
it's fun to put them on the ice.
Yeah. So you have that range. Like a guy who has a 6 attribute in something, he can never be hotter. So if he's hot in one game, that 6 attribute is the same. It's the same as if he was regular. and a guy who's a 0 in one attribute, he can never be colder than a 0. So there's limits put into place, and the game checks it. And even during the game, I mean, there's changes to those attributes, slight changes. The bonuses, team bonuses for home and away. You have power play bonus, penalty kill bonus.
Are those adjusted in the Chaos
bonus.
Draft Leagues? Those bonuses?
Yeah, so usually in draft leagues, we negate all those. There's no home, no away bonus. There's no power play or penalty kill bonus. We just set them all to 0s. So you're not getting that extra bonus. What I do is in the playoffs, so in the CDL playoffs, I'll give the home team a small bonus. So when you play at home, you have a little bit of an advantage. So, it kind of makes there's some kind of incentive to be a higher seed in the league because you get a home bonus. But I don't know if it really we've run like statistics on game results and stuff, and I don't think it really makes that big of a difference. But yeah, so those are taken out of usually on the draft leagues, we always set those to 0s, the team and the power play penalty kill bonus.
The refs, are they biased in one way, shape, or form against home or away? For whatever reason, I've been playing a lot of home games because I seem to be hosting, and I'm playing a lot of home in exhibition games. And I have an uncanny ability of drawing penalties. And I have also an uncanny ability of not having my opponent draw a penalty. I don't know what is, and you know what? I'm in this new player league. Now I'm venting now.
Oh, okay. Yeah, go ahead.
It's my show. I could vent.
Vent.
I'm in this new player league, right? And, if you look at the statistics, I forget who ran it, but by the way, whoever did, thank you very much. Yeah, it shows that for whatever reason, I'm more penalized. What the heck? So is there any ref bias in the game against home or away, or is it not there?
So I actually, looking through the code, I figured out that the aggressiveness stat, which, we never really confirmed, but the aggressiveness stat attribute of a player affects whether you're going to get a penalty or not. So every time there's a hit, the game goes through the code and it rolls the dice and it says, all right, we're going to try to throw a penalty here. And then it checks your aggressiveness of that player. And it puts it into the equation, it rolls the dice again, gives us another random result. And then based on that result, you're either getting a penalty or you're not. Kicks out of the function. And it'll give you a random penalty. It doesn't matter. There's no specific, you can get a tripping penalty without tripping a guy.
Yeah.
So it's not like it just randomizes the penalty. Except for
it's 2 minutes. I don't care how it is that they flip the switch here.
Matter,
I want to see that. If it's 2 minutes against me, screw you, ref.
Yeah. So
you hate me and I know it.
There's some games where your AI control players, so not even you, are just getting penalties up the wazoo. And there's just games like that. There's no explanation. It'd be nice to have an explanation why some games are like that, where you just get penalized like no other. But there's really no explanation other than that. If your player has high aggressiveness, you have a higher chance of getting a penalty on a hit. But if you have players like what team are you in the league?
Detroit.
Okay, so Detroit has a lot of light players, right? So Steve Yzerman has 6 weight. The weight scale is 0 to 15. There's no.
And I generally start Dallas Drake. Drake.
Yeah, Dallas Drake is a great player. He lays
the lumber. Whoever goes in front of him, bang, he's going to knock them on their ass right away. I love.
If you have Dino Cicerelli,
yep,
Dallas Drake, and Steve Yzerman, you have a lot of light players, and they're going to knock down. Of course, with the weight bug in Genesis, they're going to knock down a majority of the players. So if you're checking a lot, you're hitting a lot of people because you have these players that can knock guys down. Guess what? You run the chance of getting more penalties. It's like I said, every hit it rolls the dice on whether you're going to get a penalty. So stop hitting guys. Use the B check.
I do a lot of A. Yeah. I hold a lot too. I use the A button.
Hold a lot. That's there's a couple players that do that and they use it success.
Yeah.
Whalers is a guy in the community. He constantly holds. Everyone complains about him, but there's ways to play around it. That's the other thing in Super Nintendo, and that's a really cheap bug. So if you knock someone down, they can hit the Y button, which is equivalent to the A button in Genesis. And if the player is controlled and he gets knocked down, if it's the Y button, he pops up immediately, and he'll start holding the guy.
Right.
So that's like a very, very cheap move. I had no idea that existed until I started playing this community, and everyone does it. That's really annoying to me.
It's interesting to see that there's bugs in each of the two consoles that people take advantage of.
Mm-hmm.
Have you analyzed the code of the SNES version to the same extent that you analyzed the code of the Genesis version?
No, I haven't really looked at the code. There's another guy, Mick Marcus. He's looking through the Super Nintendo code. So that's the other thing too. The assembly for Genesis is different. It's 68,000. It's a 68,000 processor, which is very, very similar to like the Macintosh back in the day. Used the same type of processor. Super Nintendo is a different type of processor. It's like a more advanced Nintendo NES processor. So the assembly code is different. The commands are different. So comparing like the game, if you put the game code side by side, it's probably very similar, but the commands, the instructions would be different looking. So he's been looking at that more, doing the Super Nintendo side, but he can compare to Genesis and be like, oh yeah, see, this stuff is here too. The Genesis code has been over the years has been analyzed more than Super Nintendo. So we found a lot more stuff in Genesis that we haven't found in Super Nintendo. Like we can track time on ice, which isn't displayed in Genesis. If you go into the player stat screen, you don't see time on ice, but the game tracks it. And so we're able to, when you play a game online and you make a save state and you upload it to the website, we're able to extract stats from the game that you don't even see while playing. Time on ice is a big one. We haven't found that in Super Nintendo yet.
So then just based on the history, I'm talking about NHL hockey, NHL PA, and then NHL 94, it's going to be easier then to, if it's possible, to put fighting in the Genesis version than, yeah. So
yeah,
because it's more analyzed and...
Yeah, because the Genesis code... it's basically just taking the code from 92 and moving it into 94. It's just putting it in the right spot and going through all the checks and making sure it goes to that code. That's the other thing too. And then obviously the sprites and stuff. I mean, I'm not saying it can never be done on Super Nintendo, but Super Nintendo has something very weird with its graphics that in the ROM that is different than Genesis. You got to remember, you have a cartridge, you're limited on space. So a lot of the space is taken up by graphics, sprite tiles, things like that. So they compress them. So like if an image has, a white tile, like in 4 places, it's not going to draw it out in 4 places. It's just going to use one place, and then the other location is going to point to the same tile, right? And so it saves space that way. It's called compressing the image. So Super Nintendo, the image compression is completely different. Mm-hmm. It's hard to figure out. I think someone had created a Python script that might have went through and tried to decompress the Super Nintendo graphics, but it's not easy. So you can see in like a lot of custom ROM, a lot of the draft ROMs and custom ROMs that we do, we could change the graphics, very easily. The logos, the player photos, things like that, we can change them very easily. Super Nintendo, you can't do that.
You looked at the code enough in the Genesis version. I'm curious what your thoughts are about the offensive and defensive awareness and what you think they do.
So that to me is the biggest mystery, and that's my number one priority. I don't really care too much about the fighting. I want to figure out what defensive awareness and offensive awareness do. So in my opinion, a guy with a really high offensive or defensive awareness, depending on where the puck is, they usually go for the loose puck. They'll go to where the puck is. Guys who are center and they have high offensive awareness, they're usually closer to the net, so they'll pick up a lot of rebounds. But a lot of times, like a guy with the max offensive awareness, he's too close to the net to do really decent one-timers with. So you want a guy with that's 6 is the maximum. So you want a guy with like 5 or 4 offensive awareness. They sit a little bit higher in the slot. It's easier to get the pass to. They have more range of where to put the shot. But as far as like exactly what they do, no one knows. Looking at the 92 code, I've seen a couple things. It seems like there's zones in each, in the offensive zone, the neutral zone, and the defensive zone. And there's something called assignments. Each player every frame or so is given an assignment. Are they going to go to a zone? Are they going to go after the guy with the puck, try to check him, or go play defense? Things like that. There's a couple of them. I forget what they all are. All the assignments they're called. The game calls it, or the code calls it, the source code. And so that has to do with your awareness values. Like, where in the zone is your guy going to go? Well, if he's a high offensive awareness, he's probably going to go higher in the zone, or in the middle of the zone, or this way, to the left, to the right, depending on what zone it is. I think I'm getting there to the point where I could tell you, yeah, this is what it does. But it's something.
So there is something.
There is something. Yes, it's very important. It's probably. So when you look at like the overall rating of a player and how it's calculated, certain attributes are weighed more than others, and offensive awareness is one of the highest weighted. So the higher the number, the higher your overall rating is going to be. It has that, that kind of effect. I think agility is another one that's really high rating wise. That weights the overall weighting, overall rating of the player. So it's all pretty interesting what the game thinks is the important attributes, and what, a guy playing online thinks is the important attributes for a player. A lot of guys like speed, but the game doesn't think speed is, a very important attribute. It thinks agility is more important.
So Randy Wood doesn't get a boost in the rating, but even though he's still a piece of crap, regardless. He
could skate in straight lines. Don't make him turn.
Now, in terms of then the goalies, and I think Belfour has a really high defensive awareness.
Yeah.
So, do you think there's any conjunction with how well a goalie plays as an auto goalie with their defensive awareness, or does that it has no bearing in their play whatsoever?
So a while ago I did a check, and because I think King Raff had said, oh yeah, defensive awareness is a bloated stat for a goalie. It does nothing, but it raises their overall rating, but it's not important at all. I'm like, that's got to do something. So, looking in the game, I did what's called a trace, and I hooked. So you hook a RAM location. So I hooked the defensive awareness of the goalie. And so whenever it was read or written, it would tell me. And it would tell me what instruction or what address of the instruction did that. So the defensive awareness of a goalie is constantly being read.
Checked.
So it's being used. And I believe it does help in tracking. It helps the goalie track the puck.
I wonder if it also maybe would even consider if there's a player standing in front of him, and maybe he would be, kind of willing to go there ready for a one-timer. I don't know.
Yeah, but yeah, absolutely. I think you're right with that too.
Now, in terms of the rankings, the attributes for, say, the overall player, let's just mush together both the offensive and defensive players, the offense and defense. What would you rank the abilities? Like, what's the top, and then go down from there. I want to hear how you rank them, and what is maybe close to the bottom that maybe I have too high up.
So in like a forward, I think offensive awareness is the most important thing.
Really?
And defense, I think defensive awareness is the most important thing. So awareness for both ways, I think, in my opinion, is the most important.
And sorry to interrupt you. This is more so with Genesis, or either or Genesis.
This is
or
both.
SNES?
This is both.
Okay,
Yeah,
gotcha.
The thing about like Super Nintendo is the speed of a player is just so wacky. Some players are really fast one game, and then they'll be super slow the other game. So there's a couple like attributes in Super Nintendo that are just like, who the heck cares? Like, like
Benoit Hogue comes to mind. Sometimes he's a speedster, and other times he's just like slow as,
Yeah, I hate Benoit Hogue in Genesis. I hate him. I think he's overrated. There's a lot of players, I think, that when I'm looking at like, so draft leagues, we keep track of who's drafted where. right? And so you can look back and see, all right, the average draft position of this player is this. Benoit Hogue usually goes in the second round of a league, of a draft league. Oh, always mid second round, upper second round. I want to say he's so overrated. Let me tell you, he's just like he's got like, you know, agility, but no, he's not a good. He's just, you know, he's just like Anyway, so back to offensive awareness. I think is the most important. Then I would say agility and stick handling. So agility is going to be how fast you can turn. So a player with high agility is going to be very good at deking. So to be honest, both systems, Genesis, Super Nintendo, agility is very important. The stick handling is going to be, so stick handling is used in a couple situations, receiving a pass. So if a player passes to you, your stick handle rating is going to determine, you know, a higher stick handling rating is you're going to be able to accept that pass better. So, I mean, there's other variables in receiving a pass, but stick handling is the attribute that's used to collect the pass. Also, stick handling will be used to kind of like survive a check in a way. So if you're skating into a high danger area, there's a lot of players around you. If one of those players bump into you, a player with a low stick handling will lose the puck. Even if it's not a check, I'm just talking, you know, bump in, or they try to poke check you. A high stick handling player, if someone tries to poke check you, you won't lose the puck. You'll go into what's called a toddle. We call it a toddle, where you see the guy kind of like tries to balance. So usually you see that with guys who have 5 rating stick handle or higher. So the stick handling to me is very important because I want my guys to be able to accept the pass. I want them to be able to hold on to the puck. Passing is important to have. It's important to have a guy who can pass on the wing. So passing is one of those attributes we don't fully understand yet. It's used to pass, but I don't know if it's to determine the speed of the pass, to determine how accurate the pass is, if it's going to the target. That's pretty important. Shot power. So shot power is one of those things where it feels to me like it's an exponential difference. So like a guy with you have a 3-shot power, a 4-shot power. A guy, I think that there's a larger difference between a 4-shot power guy and a 5-shot power guy than there is a 3 to a 4. I think you start to see that big difference. Shot power is obviously going to be the power of the shot, how hard you hit the puck, how fast it's going. Shot accuracy is another very important attribute. It's going to hit the net. And shot accuracy is one of those attributes where if you have a really cold player and they're not very accurate to begin with, they're just going to constantly miss the net. And it's like, you might as well just sit the guy because he can't hit the net. Even if he has high shot power, like Mike Modano is a perfect example. He has 5 shot power, but he has 2 shot accuracy. So, you know, there's some games where he can't hit the broadside of a barn. And you're like, you know, this guy's a superstar and he can't even hit the net. So it's, you know, it really, you got to rethink your strategy for that game. And speed. So, you know, I'm going through all the attributes. I'm not really telling you which ones I think are important, but offensive awareness, your secrets. Offensive awareness, agility, stick handle are my 3 most important. I would say the next would be shot accuracy. I think I want my guys to always hit the net with their shots. Speed would be next. You need at least a 4-speed guy. 3-speed guys are very hard to play with, especially if you have.
So Mellenby is not one of your players.
Scott Mellenby is not one of my players.
Gotcha.
No. I need someone who's a 4-speed or better. Matt Sundin is my favorite player in the game. There's something special about him. Yeah, there's something special about him. I don't know what it is, but everyone makes fun of me about it. I think he's my favorite. I'm not saying he's the best player. I'm saying he's my favorite player in the game. Right. But he's got high offensive awareness. He's got high shot accuracy. His agility, he's 4, so he's kind of middle of the road, and his stick handle is kind of in the middle of the road. But I always play him at center. He's always in the right spot for me, so I'm happy.
He checks off a lot of boxes for you.
Yeah, he does. Yeah. Checking. So the checking attribute is used by the AI controlled player to control where he is in relation to the puck. It's actually used a lot more than just deciding if he's going to throw a check or not. It's basically used to how close he wants to be near the puck. It's very weird on the defensive end. So checking when you're an offensive player and you're the player controlling his checking doesn't really matter. It's only used with the AI control players, the computer control players.
And you're saying it's how close he wants to get to the puck?
It's very weird how often it reads the checking attribute. I haven't really fully put it down, but it's basically deciding, do I want to throw a check yet, or do I want to keep skating closer before I decide to check? It's kind of strange how it uses it. The funny thing is, in '92, there was no checking attribute. It was all aggressiveness. That was the only one used to determine checking, to determine fighting, to determine penalties. They only had aggressiveness. So they split that up at some point to add checking and to separate checking and aggressiveness. So now aggressiveness is only used when you throw a check, determining whether you're going to get a penalty. And then checking is used in other situations. So a lot of people think that's important because you want, especially on defense, I want at least one of my defensemen to be aggressive. Okay, so I want a guy with high checking. And I also want a guy on defense who can throw his weight around. So I want a guy who's heavy and a good checker. Like Scott Stevens is a very good example. Ray Bork is another very good example.
You're a CB guy, right? Like you do the...
Yeah, I don't do it that much, though. I would rather my defense do it themselves. When I'm playing defense, I want to control my wingers or my center. I want my defensemen to basically play by themselves. So I want a guy who is smart, high defensive awareness. I want a guy who can check very well. He's aggressive, so I want a high check rating. And a guy who's heavy, who has a high weight, because a heavy computer player, the weight bug is thrown out the window when it comes to computer control players. That's how a CB check works. You're throwing a check as a player, you're hitting the B button to switch off of him, so then the computer controlled player is going to finish the check. And so then that throws out the weight difference, the weight bug. So I want a guy who's heavy, who the AI is going to use to check, right? Because then he'll knock down anyone who's below his weight. If I have an 11 weight guy like Scott Stevens is 11, I think. He'll knock anyone 10 and below down, pretty much with ease. Maybe 9 and below he'll knock down almost 100% of the time. There's still a little bit of randomness, but you want to have that weight difference. Usually a 2 or more to really have a successful check. So I want a guy like that on defense.
You want McSorley out there? Yeah,
McSorley, he's slow as anything, but he plays good defense if he's there.
And if you could do that CB check correctly, he'll knock anybody on the ice.
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah. Or you leave him alone, he'll knock anyone if you can catch up to them. So that, to me, on defense, I'm looking for a guy high checking, high defensive awareness, and a heavy weight. I think that's important to me on defense. Skating, agility, not so much. I could go with a guy who's average skating or a little bit below average skating. I don't care about that. Those are the important things on defense. On offense, I want awareness, shot accuracy, stick handling, agility. On defense, I want checking.
Wow, the awareness is
high. Awareness.
That's
my opinion. You could ask someone else; they'll have a completely different opinion, and that's fine. That's
of course
what makes this game great.
Your mileage may vary.
Yeah.
So do you have a few more minutes for a few more questions? Because we're past an hour.
Absolutely. Yeah, sure.
So in terms of, you talked about this, the speed of the pass in the passing rating, because sometimes you pass the puck off and it comes out coming like a warp 9, and it's, we don't know what. Have you ever tried to examine a code as to what causes that? Because it just seems to be so random, and I can't reproduce it.
Yeah. No, I have no idea. I found the pass code. I found the speed code, which is the speed code is the same for passing and shooting, actually. So I haven't really fully analyzed it yet. I haven't gotten to those functions and kind of went through the comments and figured out what does what yet. I think I'm actually pretty close to that. But there's some very weird buggy things like that where the pass just goes really fast, and you're like,
that's charm. That's the charm of the game. That's what it really is.
That you can do that. It only keeps you on your toes, right? It's not,
of course. Another one is,
what the heck? What happened there? You'll also have sometimes where you'll do a speed burst, a C,
yes,
and all of a sudden your guy will just continually get faster, and then he'll like skate all the way to the other end, and you're like,
they turn into Randy Wood. They don't
happened to me happened to me last night, actually. I was playing against someone. It's like one of those things you're just like, what the heck? Like, it happens.
Yeah, they turn into Randy Wood with like zero agility. They just can't turn it. It's like just everybody goes.
It's but like Randy
another
Wood
one that
two,
really, another one that like irritates me to no end is where it's a guy skating along the boards and you come in and you whack him, and in your head you're expecting that cross check where you just label him into the board, but he doesn't do it. Like, what causes him not to raise his stick up to plaster him onto the board? Is that a checking thing?
It's weird. So there's in the checking code, I've actually looked through this. There's different sprites, right? So there's I forget about how many sprites there were, but it looks at the direction the player's facing in, direction the other player's facing in, and I think there is a little bit random as to what checking animation it does. The other thing, too, that I noticed is different in 94 compared to 92 is 94, it compares to when you're against the boards. Mm-hmm. So it knows you're against the boards, and it makes a check more successful when you're against the boards. 92 doesn't care. It never checks that. So that's like one of those things you see, when I'm comparing between the two, and I'm like, oh, what's all this doing here? And then you look at it, and you're like, oh, it's wall collision. So it's you're hitting into the wall after the check. After when you're getting hit, you're probably going to fall down, regardless of any other weight difference or any of that. It's just like
it's so satisfying to lay one of those checks. By the way, like,
absolutely,
you
got to check them right into the bench. That's
what. Another satisfying feeling. Yeah. Right? Yeah. So I'm just gonna rhyme off a few rapid fire questions at you because we're getting close to the end of this. Top 5 forwards in the game.
Okay, so top 5 forwards in Genesis. Going to be Steve Yzerman, Jeremy Roenick. I'll put him up there. Mike Gartner's up there for me. He's a really good player. He's very similar to Jeremy Roenick. It's just he's 7 weight. He's a little bit less shot accuracy. Alexander Mogilny is always going to be up there because he's just the fastest guy. And what did I put for 5? I think I would probably do Pavel Bure.
Top 5 defensemen.
Top 5 defensemen. Ray Bourque, number 1. Ray Bourque. Number 2 would be, I like Scott Stevens. I also like Ulf Samuelsson.
Oh,
I think those are very good guys. I'm trying to think. So that's 3. Ali Frady's very good. He's big.
He's a heavyweight.
Yeah, he's big, and he's a good skater too. Zarly Zalapsky is the guy I don't like. I don't like Chris Chelios. Those are like other people will list them in their top 5. I don't like either of them. I never have good luck with them. Also, who's actually really good is Bob Sweeney is really good.
He's legendary.
So Bob Sweeney is the king of weight bug defensemen.
He certainly is.
Yeah.
Best goalie in the game.
Best goalie game is Patrick Roy. Best now. If I want to manually control my goalie, I really like Andy Moog.
Fair enough.
Yeah, he's
top
very
five.
Good.
Top 5 overrated players in a game.
Oh, okay. Top 5 overrated players. Joe Sakic is number 1. Luke Robitaille is up there too. These are guys who always in draft leagues they always get picked near the end of the first round, and they are garbage. Just a guy. AJ calls Joe Sakic. He's the king of the Jags. Just a guy. Yeah, overrated. Those two. I'm gonna put Benoit Hogue up there because I think he's overrated too. Doug Gilmour, I think, is overrated.
Oh,
yeah. He's just, to me, he's a jack of all trades, master of none. He's just nothing spectacular about him. And who would be my 5th? Let's see.
It doesn't have to be a forward. You could pick a goalie, or you could pick a defenseman. You could
okay.
The whole top 5 period.
I'm going to pick Mark Recchi. No, those are my 5. Mark Recchi is a guy who always goes in the 10 to 12 range in a draft league, top 10, 12. And he's just not really spectacular to me. I think there's players you can get later on who are equal to him. So there we go. Those are my 5.
Favorite team to play with? Obviously, we're talking about the stock.
My favorite team to play with is Quebec.
Sundin.
Yeah.
But they had Sakic.
Yeah, but Sakic plays a secondary role to Sundin. Sakic has better passing, so I'll put him on the wing. He has a 5 pass rating, so he can pass to Sundin. Sundin can score. The Quebec is good because they have a lot of good options on offense. Their defense is horrible, and you just got to live with it. Hextall is not the greatest goalie in the world. He's very mid, but you have Kamensky on the bench who has a really good power shot, and he's a good skater. You have Mike Ricci, who I like to use. I usually start him. Owen Nolan's a very good all-around player. So there's a lot of good choices on Quebec. Kovalenko, everyone likes to use him because he's a battering ram. He has low stick handling, so he never sees the ice for me.
Fair.
But he's basically just a battering ram. Him and Theo Fleury, the lightest players in the game.
Who's your favorite opponent person to play against?
Probably my favorite person to play against is probably Mr. Tex. That's his name, Mr. T. Just because I love beating him. This is the thing. So you have 2 communities, right? Super Nintendo, Genesis. There's a lot of complainers in Genesis. A lot of guys who complain. There's always an excuse for why they lost the game. The controller wasn't working. The connection was bad. Super Nintendo, no one complains. It's like there's a guy in Super Nintendo AAA. I'll call him out. He's got probably the worst connection. And every game he plays is like he plays no defense. It's like 10-9, 11-10 the games are. But no one complains about him. I'll play him and I'll be like, wow, this connection sucks. And he lives in New Jersey too. He's northern part of New Jersey, but it's not like we're that far distance wise. But no one complains about him. There's rarely any complaints on Super Nintendo. Genesis guys are dropping out because they hate losing. Like I said, they won't play certain players because that guy's connection is bad and this and that. So many complaints. But Mr. T is a big complainer. That's why I like beating him. Because then I hear the complaints and then I'm like, yeah, whatever.
Is Florida the worst team to play with?
No, Florida's not bad. The worst team to play with is probably Anaheim. Although there's some gems on Anaheim like Terry Yake and
Semenov.
Yeah, Semenov, Kasatonov on defense, he's really good. The thing about like Florida is they have Van Beesbrook as their goalie, who's pretty decent. They have a couple of lightweight choices on defense. So if you like to check a lot with your defense, they have
Murphy and I think Hines. Is that,
yeah,
am I wrong?
Murphy and Hines. Yeah, the 2 Gords. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So and then on forward there, I wouldn't use Brian Scrudlin. He's very slow. But Lomakin's good. They have a couple of decent choices. We're talking bottom of the barrel here, right?
Of course. So, yeah.
I actually playing Super Nintendo growing up. I used to love playing with Ottawa. I don't know why. Ottawa, I just always loved playing with, and I still like playing with them to this day. And
Sylvain Turgeon's a decent player.
Yeah, in Genesis, you give me a bottom tier matchup. I'm always taking Ottawa. I don't know. I like Jamie Baker for some reason. He's
Laurie Boschman. Are you starting him?
No, I think I just go with the standard lineup. So it's
Turgeon,
Bob Kudelski, and Jamie Baker. Yeah.
In your opinion, is the music better on the SNES or on the Genesis?
No, Genesis. It's better on the Genesis.
Cheapest.
That's the other thing I think. I think a lot of Genesis games have better music than Super Nintendo games. The graphics I think are better Super Nintendo, but I think the music on Genesis is a lot better. I mean, listen, there's some exceptions like Final Fantasy III. It was great. It's my favorite game of all time. Final Fantasy VI, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, that's what it really is.
Yeah, but
I know Final Fantasy 2 and 3 is 2 and 3 because when I played them, it was 2 and 3. Yeah. It should be 4 and 6 in reality, but
4 and 6, yeah. But I think overall, the Genesis version, the music is better. Super Nintendo, like I said, it's fun to play. You want to have fun, go play Super Nintendo.
Cheapest move in NHL 94. I don't care what console.
The cheapest move in NHL 94 is the C-check off the face-off. So when you're trying to win a face-off and the other guy just decides to ram you, that's the cheapest move in the game. By far.
You don't want to see Fleury as the opposing centerman.
The center, yeah. If I see him and I don't see him poke checking in the face-off window, I know what he's going to do. He's going to C-check me. So I'm not trying to win the face-off at that point. What I'm trying to do is I'll try to hold. I'll do the hold.
Yeah.
See if I can hold him. The puck will float past one of us, and one of the other players will get it. It doesn't work all the time. Yeah, it's a chess match. It does exactly. That's the whole thing. I see this guy doing something. I have to counteract that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just maddening. Super Nintendo, it's just like the checking doesn't matter. We have no idea what anyone could check anyone. So it's like you could throw a C check and check the other guy, even if you're the weights are off and stuff like that. So, but I hate C checks on the face off. That's the absolute worst move.
And I guess I have one final question for you before we wrap things up. If you could change one thing, and I think you touched upon it, but I just want you to expand on it further. If you could change one thing about NHL 94, what would that be?
So actually, this is what I would change in 94. In 96, I think you could shot block in 96. Have you ever played NHL 96?
It's 95
before?
Or 96, you could press A to shot block.
Yeah, I think it's 96. I would love to add shot blocking to 94. That's like
the fake shots too.
That's one of my goals is hitting a button, so you get down on they get down on their knees and they block the shot. Yeah. I would like to add that.
Oh, well, I'm telling you, we should get the GoFundMe campaign running before. Is there any last things you want to say? This is the final segment before we sign off. Any final words? Anything you wanted to say? Shout out to anybody? You want to chirp somebody? Go ahead.
Oh yeah, no. I mean, not really. I mean, it's great. Evan, who is the guy who created NHL94.com, and back in 2005, maybe even before that, but they started playing online leagues in 2005. I joined in 2007, so he's a great guy. I mean, shout out to him. He's he's not really involved in anything that much anymore. But if I ever have a question, I can text him. He'll answer. He's a really great guy, and just being able to play this game online against other people, it's big thanks to him. This is all his doing. He pays for the server, never asked for a dime. So he's a great guy. Shout out to him. Shout out to King Raf. I mean, he's my buddy. We do a lot of tournaments together. He's a real big help in the community. Angry Jay helps me with the website, so I got to give him a shout out. He's really been stepping it up lately, setting up the leaks and stuff. Used to be all me, but I got him up to speed. He's able to help me out with a lot of stuff on the website now. So big shout out to him. And shout out to the NHL 94 community. I mean, we're still here because people still play the game, and it's fun to play it online. It's fun to just talk about the game. The Discord is very active.
You don't want to chirp anybody?
I'm going to chirp Dan. Dan is he's a little full of himself. He's a great streamer when he decides to stream. So he's got to stream a little more. Mr. T, I know right now he's got a concussion he got from getting hit in the back of the head with a soccer ball, but that's all we hear about is his concussion and how it's affecting his play. Like I said, always an excuse. I'm not saying concussion's very serious, but that guy's always got an excuse. So
we need people like that in the community.
Yeah, he'll hear this. I hope he laughs because we met in person. He's a really nice guy. He's a great guy. It's just I like picking on him.
Well, Chaos,
it's all in fun.
I want to thank you for coming on the show. This has gone a little bit longer than originally planned, so I appreciate you for being flexible.
That. I talk a lot.
No, this has been great. I'm happy. I feel bad that we took a little bit longer than originally planned for you. So, but I actually, you were very flexible. We were supposed to do this last week, but because of family commitments, I did switch to this week. But either way, thank you so much for coming on. We'll have you back on the show once again because there's going to be so many people coming on. But eventually, I want to have you back on the show if you're.
Oh, absolutely! And I hope next time I come back on, I could tell you more about the code. Talk more about
Let's do that. All right. With that being said, keep your stick on the ice and your controller plugged in.